Have you ever wondered what you get if you add up all the positive whole numbers together? Well, I think it's an absolutely obvious and simple problem. I mean, any number added to infinity equals infinity. So it's all pretty clear. What is there even to discuss? I'll probably surprise you by saying that the sum of all positive whole numbers actually equals a negative number, a fractional one to be precise, minus 1/12. That's right. How do we know this? We know it from a strange letter, from a strange envelope, that Sir Godfrey Harold Hardy received in the year 1913. Allow me to introduce myself. I am a clerk in the accounting department of the Port of Madras. I have no university education. I would like to present for your consideration a few results. These are only a portion of the formulas I have developed. I do not include my own derivations or the reasoning required to prove these formulas. I do not wish to give the impression that I claim to have made any great discovery. I merely ask that you look through the enclosed pages, as I am poor. If you find any value in them at all, I would like my theorems to be published. I kindly request that you review my materials. My work has not yet been published anywhere, and I am extremely poor. If you find my results worthy of attention, I ask that you extend to me the help and support you usually offer to newcomers in mathematics. With deepest respect, your obedient servant, Srinivasa Ramanujan. What would you have done if you'd received such a strange letter? You'd probably have looked at the formulas, and the formulas were very strange. Let's start with the one I just shared with you. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and so on to infinity equals minus 1/12. 1 cubed plus 2 cubed plus 3 cubed plus 4 cubed and so on to infinity equals minus 1/20. Infinity equals pi squared divided by 6. In total, there were 176 strange formulas from the field of number theory. Not a single one of these formulas had ever been postulated by anyone, nor had any of them ever been proven before. In mathematics, formulas of this kind are called conjectures. A conjecture is a mathematical statement that is believed to be true based on observation or intuition, but which has not yet been proven. So he received in those enclosed pages 179 conjectures. The question is, what would you do if, as an established mathematician, you received such a letter? And Sir Harold Hardy did exactly what any reasonable and rational person would have done. He asked for proofs of those theorems. These equations are not the product of my labor. I do not derive them through the sweat of reason, as European scholars do. No. These formulas appear before my inner vision, as though the goddess Namagiri herself, beloved of my heart, writes them in fiery script upon my tongue while I sleep. And when I awaken, I already know them, not as a man who has understood or proven something, but as a vessel that has been filled and then emptied. I do not so much derive or discover them as receive them from above. When I close my eyes in prayer, numbers and symbols dance before me, forming series of infinite fractions that seem impossible, yet true. Sometimes they come as a whisper, sometimes as a cry. And when I write them down, I do not know why they are true, or whether they are true at all. You may not believe me, but when I begin to doubt myself, the goddess appears to me again in a dream and offers me the next formula. And she tells me, your task is to deliver. Do not judge. Proof will be the work of others. Thus I live. I am not a scholar in your sense of the word. I am merely a bridge between heaven and paper. With deepest respect, your obedient servant, S. Ramanujan. And then followed 12 more pages of formulas. The enclosed formulas were absolutely strange, utterly audacious, and yet inspired immense astonishment. And so, before you is one of the formulas included in the second letter, one concerning the derivation of the number pi. The question remains, what would you have done in such a situation if you, being a well-known professor, a teacher, a luminary of mathematics at the Cambridge Institute, had received 2 such strange letters? Sir Hardy invited the unknown man, paid for his journey, and it is thanks to this that we know the biography of Srinivasa, known in Russian as Srinivasa Ramanujan. Here is what the reference books say about him. Srinivasa Ramanujan, 1887–1920. An Indian self-taught mathematician whose discoveries shook the scientific world, was born into a poor Brahmin family in southern India. From childhood, Ramanujan displayed an unusual fascination with numbers and never had any formal university education. Ramanujan did not merely solve problems, he saw formulas. According to him, they appeared to him in dreams, as if whispered to him by the goddess Namagiri. He saw himself not as their author, but as a conduit, a mediator between the divine essence and the world of numbers. From 1914 to 1919, Ramanujan worked in Cambridge, where, together with Hardy, he created many of the deepest theorems. He made major discoveries in number theory, Q-series, modular equations, infinite series, the partition function, and approximations of the number pi. Many of his ideas were far ahead of their time and continue to inspire mathematicians to this day. Poor health and homesickness weakened him. In 1919, he returned to India, but soon after died at the age of 32. Despite his short life, Ramanujan left behind more than 3,900 formulas, many of which were confirmed only decades later. Now, a few facts. This mysterious young man, Ramanujan, personally proved no more than 200 of those formulas, those same conjectures, and most of his proofs were incorrect. Nevertheless, scholars continue to be fascinated by the proofs of Ramanujan's conjectures, and more than 3,000 of them have already been proven. Mathematicians have confirmed over 3,000 formulas written by this strange, brilliant young man. An interesting detail: not a single one of his formulas turned out to be wrong. Several dozen of his formulas remain unproven, and a great many researchers continue to wrestle with Ramanujan's work. Particularly intriguing is the so-called notebook, the lost notebook of Ramanujan. It goes like this. After his death in 1920, one notebook was sent to Cambridge University. It contained 87 pages and was written during the last year of his life, after his return to India. The manuscript was carefully examined at the time, but the complexity of the formulas made them impossible to prove, or even to understand why they were worth studying. The notebook was forgotten. That is to say, the man had written formulas whose meaning, purpose, and mathematical necessity were completely unclear. What he wrote could not be understood, and so the notebook was forgotten until 1976, when mathematician George Andrews of Pennsylvania University accidentally discovered the so-called lost notebook of Ramanujan in the Wren Library of Trinity College, Cambridge. He was astonished by its contents, which included Ramanujan's final modular form formulas. There were quantum series, new triumphs involving Q-series. Many of the formulas from that notebook are now used in string theory and quantum field theory. Without them, these theories could not have advanced as they have. To this day, Bruce Berndt, in collaboration with Andrews, has devoted decades to decoding and proving those formulas, still publishing book after book of proofs of Ramanujan's formulas from the forgotten notebook. And here the inquisitive mind of my listener might ask, what does this actually prove? Yes, indeed, there was such a genius as Ramanujan. Yes, he really wrote down some formulas. Yes, he could not prove them. But was there not once a Mozart who could compose directly onto the page? As we know, Mozart had no drafts. He too claimed that music came to him in his mind. He merely wrote it down on paper. There was Archimedes with his law of buoyancy, which he discovered in his bath. There was Dmitri Mendeleev, who saw the periodic table of elements in a dream. There was Albert Einstein, who described the theory of relativity and said that it too, including its formulas, came to him in his sleep. So nothing unusual here. Move along, nothing to see. All geniuses come up with things in their dreams. There's even a special term for it, you might be surprised. It's called intuitive insight. A person simply perceives something intuitively. But in this case, the situation was a little different. This very peculiar Ramanujan never actually thought about the formulas he wrote. He had no idea what that strange goddess of Namagiri would bring him in his dreams. He never pondered questions like, what would happen if you take the square root of 1, plus the square root of 1 plus 2, plus the square root, and so on? What would that equal? And in his dream, he was told, 3. The unusual thing about Ramanujan was that his mind seemed to unload these formulas from within itself, formulas whose meaning he often did not understand and whose proofs he did not possess. He simply wrote down a kind of mathematical text on paper, one he had never previously labored over or reasoned through. This does not in any way diminish his worth as a person, undeniably brilliant and gifted. But the very fact that he personally could not prove more than 200 formulas, most of which were proven incorrectly, while the majority have since been proven by rather average mathematicians, suggests something else entirely. It shows that he was talented, but not a mathematical genius in the conventional sense. His formulas were proven quite easily by mathematicians who were competent, talented, yes, but not extraordinary. He himself could not cope with proving them, and yet he somehow received these strange formulas from somewhere. And here we come to the main subject of our gathering. Mathematics is the language of God. No, that is not my statement. It is what geometry itself declares. Or rather, not the geometry we studied in the 6th grade of a Soviet school, but gematria. The word geometry is derived from this concept. It is a method in which each letter of the Hebrew alphabet corresponds to a numerical value. By summing these numbers, one can find hidden connections between words, phrases, verses, or paragraphs. For example, Aleph equals 1, Bet equals 2, Gimel equals 3, Yod equals 10, Kaf equals 20, Lamed equals 30, Tav equals 400, and so on. For example, one of the words for God, Elohim, has a numerical value of 86. And what does that prove? It proves quite a lot. The entire system of Kabbalah, the science that emerged in the 13th century in Europe, in Spain, is built upon this. Kabbalah is an attempt to explain the existence of God mathematically. Imagine, in the 13th century, these Jewish scholars were struggling with this strange idea to prove the existence of God through mathematics. The proofs, admittedly, are rather unusual. For instance, the word love has a numerical sum equal to 13, and the word unity also equals 13. This symbolizes that love is the path to unity. Or take another example. The word Mashiach, Messiah, has a numerical value of 358. The word serpent also equals 358. This, they say, completely proves that the depth, distance, and connection between good and evil are tied to the Mashiach. The Kabbalists then went further into studying the name of God, and in Kabbalistic tradition it is believed that the Torah, the entire Torah, this massive text, is itself the name of God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. This word, as written in Kabbalah, is both the name and the meaning of God and the universe, or so they believe. That is, the Torah is viewed as a single mathematical array. Each letter has a numerical value. From this, one can draw truly astonishing and fascinating conclusions. For example, in one of the 72 interpretations of the word God, the sum of the letters equals 26, and in the word love, the sum of the letters also equals 26. Therefore, God is love. Such a simple mathematical proof. And here again, a curious reader might justifiably ask, why am I telling you all this nonsense about Kabbalah and gematria? Well, it's obvious even to a child that this is absolutely not a mathematical proof. for 100 reasons. To begin with, there is no logic in these proofs, and moreover, if you apply the same logic to other languages, Greek, Russian, English, it simply doesn't work. So one can only chuckle and smile about it, and perhaps recall an amusing story. There are rumors circulating in Silicon Valley that Sergey Brin's father, Mikhail Brin, who emigrated to America with young Sergey and later taught mathematics there, was, before leaving, a Kabbalist. Again, these rumors have never been confirmed. But being a Kabbalist, he supposedly wrote a number of programs or developed methods for searching patterns, that is, for finding recurring trends in numerical arrays. It was his son, Sergey Brin, who supposedly used these mathematical Kabbalistic methods of searching for strange numbers and statistically improbable repetitions when creating the Google search engine. But of course, that's what the rumors say. Who really knows? Undoubtedly, these methods and this knowledge are used in both decryption and encryption. That is certainly true. But, in essence, it probably doesn't prove anything more than that. But I have one question for you, my dear listeners. The people who have been developing these theories for several centuries are far more intelligent than you and I put together, by an order of magnitude. In other words, we're not dealing with fools. We're dealing with individuals whose intellectual potential is equal to that of geniuses. These are human geniuses, philosophers, mystics. And yet, for some reason, they fail to see the obvious logical contradiction in their peculiar proof. At this point, we should recall the Dunning-Kruger curve. The Dunning-Kruger curve, as you know, illustrates the following. People who know very little tend to believe they know everything. Then, as their understanding deepens, their sense of how much they know sharply declines. And only among true experts does it rise again, but even experts never feel that they know everything. That is, when someone confidently and unequivocally declares that God does not exist and claims to know this for certain, basing it on what appears to be classical, visually observable logic, well, ladies and gentlemen atheists, who are so sure that there is no God, let us move past these childish notions and ask ourselves a simple question. A question that was already posed by Plato. In the absence of the universe, does mathematics exist? You must admit this is far from a trivial question. Or, for example, would the same mathematics exist in another universe as it does in ours? Here we arrive at the theory of the multiverse, which can be divided into three possible frameworks. First, the cosmological multiverse, which arises from the theory of inflation, the idea that our universe is just one bubble among many. Accordingly, in different bubbles, the same mathematics would apply, meaning that mathematics is universal. Second, the quantum multiverse, or the Everett interpretation, which also holds that the universe splits into many branches. But since all these branches originate from the same source, mathematics would be identical in all universes. And third, the mathematical multiverse of Max Tegmark, who claimed that mathematics itself could differ across universes. So there you have it. Try to determine which of these three concepts is correct. But if the first or second is true, then the answer to whether mathematics functions in other universes is a definite yes. That is, mathematical structures are preserved. Logic, arithmetic, topology, probability theory, differential equations, the theory of series convergence, and so on. All of these would function in any universe and within any system of calculation. In different physical universes, the very constants I just mentioned may vary. Gravity, the speed of light, Pascal's constants, and many, many other physical conditions might differ. Yet mathematics itself remains the same. And here we return to the question once asked by Plato. If mathematics exists independently of consciousness, without the mind, then it exists without the universe and before the universe. Thus, mathematics is the language of God. And so we arrive at what is called divine Platonism. This Platonism existed even before the emergence of the three major religions. It is, in essence, a philosophical doctrine asserting that ideas, such as mathematical formulas, exist objectively, immutably, and eternally. Accordingly, they do not depend on consciousness, nor on the presence or absence of the material world. We merely discover mathematics, much like the mathematician Ramanujan, to whom formulas would come in dreams. That is, we can comprehend these truths, but we do not create them. They exist beyond us. They are completely immaterial and eternal. Universes may change, but mathematical logic remains. And if we ever encounter another civilization, there is no doubt that they will operate according to exactly the same mathematical logic, perhaps expressed in a different numeral system. From the viewpoint of Plato and later of Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, and other renowned philosophers, according to those very philosophers, God is the guarantor of logic, of order, and of truth, the Platonic God. So, my friends, not only does mathematics exist beyond our consciousness, and not only do we merely comprehend a logic conceived by someone else, not by us, but for us, but this logic is the same in every universe. Not only is the universe described by mathematics, not only are the physical parameters of the universe elegantly and precisely expressed through mathematical formulas, those formulas themselves are elegant. The formulas are astonishingly elegant, and this elegance drives physicists mad. The grace and precision of mathematical equations, their simplicity in describing the structure of the universe, utterly captivates scientists. It feels as though God, or mathematics itself, is playing some mysterious game with physicists. The physicist Roger Penrose, for instance, one of the greatest mathematicians and physicists of our time, devoted immense effort to studying and proving the formulas of Ramanujan. And so, this very physicist, Roger Penrose, said that mathematical structures are too beautiful to be accidental. I understand that for most of you who have not devoted your lives to mathematics or physics, this logic cannot serve as formal proof. Yet it leads us to another remarkable thinker. I believe many of you have already guessed that I am speaking of Kurt Gödel, the Austrian-American logician, mathematician, and profound philosopher, one of the greatest and most brilliant minds of the 20th century. It is enough to recall that toward the end of his life he worked at Princeton University, where Albert Einstein wrote in his diary that his greatest pleasure and honor was walking to work with Kurt Gödel and engaging in conversations about the creation of the universe and the meaning of the divine. What a fascinating pair they were, discussing the very questions we are trying to contemplate here. They found these topics genuinely compelling. Gödel's intellectual legacy had an immense influence on modern mathematics, physics, theology, and even the theory of artificial intelligence. His works continue to be studied and reinterpreted. Some of them remain not fully understood even today, for they reveal the fundamental limits of human knowledge and logic. During his lifetime, Kurt Gödel wrote, "The world is arranged in a rational and logical way, and I believe that mathematics is the reflection and language of a higher intelligence." End of quote. After his death, a small notebook was found containing what appeared to be a mathematical proof of the existence of God, a logical proof derived from the theory of modal logic, discovered in the 1980s. The theory was published and has never been refuted. Moreover, its logical structure has been confirmed by artificial intelligence. There now exists an improved version of Gödel's proof, but no one has yet managed to disprove it. Why is this important? Because once we begin to consider that the universe was created by someone, according to some comprehensible logic, we must also assume it was created for a purpose. Nothing rational can exist without purpose. And that brings forth a vast number of fascinating questions, namely, what was the purpose behind the creation of the universe? But we'll speak of that in another lecture. For now, let us return to Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Gödel's first theorem, the incompleteness theorem, states that in any mathematically describable system that is consistent and built upon strict logical rules, there will always exist statements that can neither be proven nor disproven within that system itself. Gödel's second theorem states, if a system can be described mathematically and is internally consistent, then it cannot prove its own consistency from within itself. There must exist another, higher-level system to confirm the integrity of the first. In other words, a system cannot issue itself a certificate declaring that everything within it is fine. To prove its consistency, one must use another, more powerful, mathematically describable system. But then a natural question arises. Where does this infinite chain of systems end? This, of course, is not a direct proof of the existence of God, yet logically it leads to the same conclusion, that there must exist a kind of system, which itself is not mathematically describable but is instead the source of mathematics, and that essentially is the philosophical proof of God. So, my friends, let's summarize. There are atheists, those who claim to know that God does not exist, and no matter what logical evidence you present, they are certain of it. But that certainty is a form of faith, just as believing that there is a God is faith. It is not, strictly speaking, a scientific stance. The scientific position is to follow the trail of evidence wherever it leads, guided by logic and empirical reasoning, by what in logic is called conjunction, the accumulation of connected proofs and testimonies. In other words, I do not know whether God exists or not. I am open to any interpretation that logic and evidence may suggest. That position is called agnosticism, from the word agnostos, meaning unknown. The third position is deism, from deo, God. It is the belief in a conscious creator who does not intervene in daily life, who is not an old man with a gray beard sitting in the heavens, but rather an intelligence that created this universe and the laws governing it, according to a logic known only to itself and with a purpose. That is deism. And beyond that, of course, there are confessional religions, which we all know. So in essence, there are four categories. Now, there exists a popular notion that science has disproved God and that all scientists are atheists. That is a profound misconception, one refuted by countless examples of scientists who were, at the very least, deists, and many who were deeply religious. To recognize that mathematics exists beyond the universe, beyond matter, and that we merely discover it, while at the same time denying the existence of any intelligence that created mathematics, is utterly illogical. And this brings us back to the Dunning-Kruger curve, which reminds us that those who know the least often believe they know the most, and only as knowledge expands does one begin to grasp. I have gone through this journey myself. I was once a Soviet semi-intellectual, and when asked whether God existed, I confidently and unequivocally said no, believing it all to be the invention of ignorant shepherds in the Arabian desert. We, the educated and civilized, knew there was no God. But only when I began to glimpse the design of the universe, when I learned more about mathematics, astrophysics, microbiology, cell biology, DNA, and the workings of the brain. Through these increasingly evident insights, without claiming to be an expert, as I moved a little further along the Dunning-Kruger curve, I understood. To categorically deny the existence of a creator is meaningless. Postscriptum. Why do I record these strange videos? Why, on a channel that seems to be devoted to politics and economics, do such unusual and to many irritating videos appear? This is my attempt to share with you the knowledge and intellectual journey I myself have undergone. For some of you, it may be helpful. For others, it may bring discomfort or even irritation. Many will say, "Why should I care whether there is a creator or not? It won't make my wallet any fuller or emptier." Someone might say, "This information is irrelevant to me," and that person would be mistaken. The world today, whether you like it or not, is experiencing a powerful bifurcation point. I would call it a bottleneck. One of the sharpest reductions in the human population on the planet, caused by factors never before seen in history. Historians and researchers in human genetics have discovered that humanity has gone through several such bottlenecks, something I intend to discuss in another video as well. Each time in the history of our species, our ancestors were reduced to just a few thousand individuals, and then expanded again. This metaphorical story of the new ark symbolizes yet another genetic bottleneck. Few people make it through the narrow passage of history. We are now entering a new historical bottleneck. Most of the DNA of the people currently living on Earth will not be preserved in the near historical future. Only a few, the chosen few, will continue. I understand that for many of you, this too may seem irrelevant. But what we are witnessing is a fascinating phenomenon, once depicted in the paintings of the divine Hieronymus Bosch. Those who know his works recall that he was a Dutch painter, haunted by visions that bordered on madness. He explained them by saying that he saw a world in which religion was disappearing, faith in the divine was fading away, and the world was sinking ever deeper into materiality. That very world, the one that says, "I don't care what you think about God, it won't put any more money in my wallet." It is that material world that Hieronymus Bosch painted. He created strange, nightmarish paintings where people were crucified on cellos, where animals copulated with humans. This surreal world of Bosch, that is what we are witnessing today. It is the very horror that religious philosophers once predicted. What would happen to humanity if faith and religion were abolished? And now we are seeing it unfold before our eyes. As a result, we face an extraordinarily rare phenomenon, historically speaking, a process that will span only a few generations, but nonetheless a rare decline in the human population of the planet. And this decline, I believe, is tied to the absence of faith. No, it cannot be explained away by saying that it is because too many cities were built, or because women gained access to education. Empirical evidence does not confirm those theories. The population is shrinking precisely in places where people have consciously abandoned faith and the search for meaning in life. We are built in such a way that we are monkeys with a sense of purpose. Remove that sense of purpose, and we simply degenerate, and that, in essence, is what we are now observing. I'm recording this series of videos. There will be one about the sense of purpose and the monkeys, another about the precise and finely tuned parameters of the universe, all in an effort to explain what I believe to be the most important question of all. What was the purpose of the creation of the universe by the Creator? Does the Creator exist? Does the soul exist? And all the other questions that, unfortunately, most materialistic people, those who believe the main goal in life is to be happy, have ceased to ask. That belief, the main thing in life is to be happy, is one of the deepest philosophical delusions dominating the planet today. No, my friends, that is far from the main thing. Moreover, if you believe that the ultimate goal of life is to be happy, you might not succeed, and your children certainly won't. You are, in essence, morally castrating your own children if you live by the principle that the main thing in life is to be happy. So, stay tuned to this channel. There will be more and more of these strange videos, the kind that irritates so many people. Goodbye, and until next time.